Renata Sudiro had never stepped foot in her grandmother's house since she was a child. The old white-painted house stood at the edge of Randu Jati village, surrounded by rice fields and teak trees. It had been more than 12 years since her last visit, and now, after her mother's passing a month ago, she felt she had nowhere else to return to, except this house. Her first night in her grandmother's house felt strange. The air was extremely humid, and the sound of crickets seemed more like screams than chirps. Exactly when the clock struck 11 at night, her ears caught a faint sound coming from the back of the house. It wasn't the wind, nor was it the sound of mice in the kitchen. The sound was laughter. Soft, eerie laughter from a woman, spreading a chilling and dreadful atmosphere. Renata froze in her bed. She had turned off her bedroom light an hour ago, but sleep hadn't come yet. Now, her body stiffened. She tried to listen more closely. The laughter came again. Soft, raspy, as if hiding tears beneath an empty amusement. As though something was laughing at the world, or at herself. Slowly, Renata rose from her bed. Her footsteps crept toward the back window. Through the glass, she could see the overgrown backyard covered in bushes and wild grass. In the far right corner of the yard stood an old well, surrounded by wooden fencing and covered with slanted roof tiles. She remembered playing near that well as a child, but her mother had strictly forbidden it. The laughter sounded again, this time, closer. Driven by some unknown force, Renata slowly opened the window. The night air rushed into her face, bringing the scent of wet earth and jasmine. Yes, unmistakably. Even though there were no jasmine plants in the yard. Her eyes squinted into the darkness. Then she saw it. A white figure floating above the well. Its long hair hung down, covering part of its face. Its body hovered as if held by invisible strings. It didn't move, just floated. And that face stared straight at her with pitch-black eyes. Its lips curled into a grin, then the laughter came again, seeming to come from the well itself, piercing straight into Renata's chest. Her body went rigid. Her breath caught in her throat. Her legs wanted to run, but couldn't. In that moment, time seemed to stop. Then the figure slowly spun around, drifting away from the well, and vanished into the shadows of the night. Renata collapsed onto the floor of her room. Her hands trembled as she tried to close the window. She shivered, not from the night breeze, but because her eyes had just witnessed something she was never meant to see. And worse still, the laughter still echoed in her ears, even after everything fell silent. Several minutes passed before she finally managed to take a deep breath. With trembling limbs, she returned to her bed, wrapping herself tightly in the blanket up to her head. But the sound, the face, and the lingering scent of jasmine that filled the room refused to disappear. The night felt unbearably long. And Renata knew, whatever she had seen earlier, was no mere nightmare.
Hello, friends. After watching this video story, friends should give likes and subscribe to motivate us to make more interesting, gripping, terrifying, mystical and mysterious video stories. Also, don't forget to click the bell icon so you know when we upload a new video. And happy watching.
The next morning, the sun of Bojonegoro slipped through the gaps in the curtains, spilling light across the floor and onto Renata's pale face. She hadn't slept all night, only closed her eyes, while her heart never truly calmed. The laughter, and that white figure, still fresh in her memory, dancing like mist refusing to vanish. Renata finally found the courage to speak up. During breakfast, she stared at her grandmother, Mrs. Pardini, who was stirring tea in her small cup. "Neck," she said softly, "last night I saw something outside, near the well." Mrs. Pardini abruptly stopped moving her spoon. Her hand trembled for a moment, then slowly placed the spoon on the table. Her gaze changed. No longer warm as usual, but rather as if she were measuring whether she was ready to hear the truth or better left in ignorance. "What did you see, Na?" Mrs. Partini's voice was low, almost a whisper. Renata swallowed hard. A white figure. Long hair, it was hovering above the well. Its face was pale, its eyes black. and it laughed. For several moments, silence filled the room. Only the ticking of the old wall clock continued, as if counting the seconds of tense quiet. Then Mrs. Pardini rose from her chair, walked slowly toward the window facing the well, and gazed outside without saying a word. "That's no ordinary well," she murmured quietly. "It has been sealed for a long time. Since that incident, we closed it tightly, and no one dared to come near. But on Friday Kliwon nights, something often comes. Something unseen." Renata fell silent. "What happened, Neck?" Mrs. Pardini took a deep breath, as though digging up memories buried deep in time. "Long ago, there was a girl in this village. Her name was Larasati. Beautiful, quiet, but always looked sad. She lived with her sickly mother, and their life was poor. One day, Larasati became pregnant, but no one knew who the father was. Some say it was a man from the city, but no one could prove it. Back then, people here weren't kind to shame," continued Mrs. Pardini, her eyes distant. "Larasati became the subject of gossip, mocked, avoided. Even her own mother was ashamed and told her to leave. Larasati disappeared, until one night, villagers found her clothes by the edge of the well. They said she jumped, took her own life. Her body was never found. Since that night, the well has never been the same." Renata felt goosebumps rise on her skin. She clearly remembered the face she had seen last night. Was that Larasati, whom I saw?" "I don't know," Mrs. Pardini answered softly. "But every Friday Kliwon night, someone always hears crying and laughter at the same time. Some say Larasati returns. But not as a human anymore." Renata gripped her teacup tightly. Suddenly, the faint scent of jasmine returned to her nose, even though there were no flowers in the house. She glanced out the window. The well stood silently. But after hearing the story, she felt as though the place was alive, watching back. "Grandma," she asked slowly, "why didn't my mother ever bring me here when I was little?" Mrs. Pardini turned, and this time, her eyes held an unmistakable look of guilt. "Because your mother didn't want you to know. She once saw something at that well when she was your age. Ever since, she refused to stay here for long. Even when I was ill, she preferred hiring a nurse instead of coming back." Renata was stunned. Her mother had been hiding something. And now, piece by piece, it demanded to be uncovered. The morning was still young, but the air inside the old house felt heavy. Renata knew she was already too deep, and that old well in the backyard wasn't just a relic of the past. It was like a portal, connecting their world to something unfinished. Since hearing the name Larasati, something inside Renata had been stirred. It wasn't just curiosity, it felt like an invisible thread tugging at her thoughts, urging her to uncover the girl's past. Night came quicker than usual, and the cloudy weather made the house feel darker than ever before. Mrs. Pardini seemed tired, falling asleep early in her armchair, leaving Renata free to explore the parts of the house that hadn't been touched in years. At the back of the old kitchen, where the walls were already stained with dampness, there was a small storage room filled with a musty smell. Renata pushed open the rusty door with force, as its hinges had long since seized up. Inside, there wasn't much, just stacks of cardboard boxes, rotting wood scraps, and an old iron cabinet covered in spiderwebs. She searched shelf by shelf with a small flashlight from her phone. And behind a rusted paint can, she found it. A small wooden box, dark brown in color, locked with a loose, aged key. Renata took a deep breath and slowly pried it open. Inside lay a worn-out red notebook, faded with time. Its cover was scratched, and the edges were yellowed. But one thing made Renata stop breathing, written in black ink on the top right corner. Larasati. Renata's heart pounded harder. She opened the first page. The handwriting was slanted and neat, a woman's delicate script. "I love him, even though he won't acknowledge this child. I'd rather die than become a shame to my family. But if I go, Who will hold my child when they cry? Renata flipped the next page, now trembling. The deeper she read, the stronger her empathy grew. Larasati wasn't the reckless girl the villagers whispered about. She was simply a woman who had loved deeply, then been left broken, and punished by a society that gave no space for tears or hope. My mother says I must disappear. There is no place for an illegitimate child. But I still believe someone out there will know that I once lived. That I once loved with all my heart. The next pages were nearly unreadable. Ink had faded, smeared by what looked like water damage. But one sentence stood out clearly, almost deliberately. I will return when they are all asleep. I will make them understand the pain of being abandoned. Renata froze. That line echoed in her mind like a whisper she'd heard that night, the laughter and crying at once. Larasati wasn't just a restless spirit. She was a memory refused to be remembered. A wound that had never healed. Renata carried the diary to her room, shut the window tightly, and sat on the floor, her breath caught in her throat. She held the book as if it contained the beating heart of a past that refused to stop. Outside, rain began to fall gently, tapping on the old roof tiles like the chime of a bell calling memories back to life. Just then, the wall clock struck 12 times. Friday Kliwon had arrived. And like the nights before, the sound returned. A raspy laugh from the direction of the well. But this time, it was different. Renata felt a cold draft enter her room, even though the window was closed. The scent of jasmine crept in, stronger than ever, and the laughter no longer sounded like it was coming from outside. This time, it felt like it was right behind her. Renata didn't dare turn around. But she heard a whisper, very close, nearly in her ear. You found me, now it's your time to listen. The lights in her room flickered, and for a split second, the reflection of a long-haired woman appeared in the mirror on the wardrobe. Her eyes were hollow, but her mouth curled into a grin, while silently crying at the same time. Renata didn't sleep that night. Her body sat stiff on the mattress, gripping Larasati's diary, now slightly damp from her trembling hands. Outside her room, the wind whispered through the roof tiles. The teak leaves gently brushed against each other. But inside her room, the laughter and crying still echoed faintly, like a ghostly reverberation from a timeless corridor that could not be sealed. She waited for morning, but time seemed unwilling to move forward. At 3 a.m., the sounds changed. It was no longer just laughter and tears, but also footsteps, as if someone were walking across the roof of the house. Then came a creaking sound, soft, slow, and soon after, the scent of jasmine grew stronger, wrapping around Renata's room like a thick veil. Something inexplicable appeared in the second paragraph. A wet trail suddenly formed on her bedroom floor, even though the rain had stopped since 1 o'clock. The trail led from the door toward the window. And at its end, a pair of bare footprints stood facing her, as if their owner was now invisibly standing only a few steps away from Renata. Her breath caught in her throat. Renata forced herself to stand up and open the bedroom door. She walked slowly toward the living room. Her grandmother's house was silent, the hanging lamp flickered softly as it swayed. Yet as she stepped onto the cold tiles heading toward the kitchen, she saw something that made her knees weaken. The back door was slightly open. The wind gently blew the thin curtain hanging in front of it. Holding her breath, Renata pushed aside the curtain and stepped into the backyard. Silence. Only the soft dripping of water from the wet teak leaves, and distant croaks from frogs. But there, exactly at the same spot as 2 nights ago, the old well stood silently defiant. Its wooden fence remained unchanged, covered by a worn-tiled roof. Yet tonight, the rope hanging above it moved slowly, as if stirred by the wind. Or, as if recently used. Renata stared at the well for a long time. The scent of jasmine was suffocating. And now she clearly saw, fresh jasmine flowers were scattered around the edge of the well, like offerings laid before sending off a spirit. She took a step closer. Her heart pounded louder with every step. As she nearly reached the wooden fence, a voice came from behind the well. "You can feel me now, right?" Renata staggered backward. That voice, soft, yet clear. She turned around. No one was there. But the air around her had changed. The previously cold atmosphere became hot and heavy, as if a wave of burning mist surrounded the yard. Then she saw it, not a full figure of a ghost, but the reflection of a woman's face in the puddles around the well. The face was crying and smiling at the same time. "Why did you call me?" Renata asked, not sure who she was speaking to. Her lips moved on their own, her heart filled with a mix of fear and empathy. Then another voice came. This time, directly inside her head. "I never wanted to return. But they made me this way. You read my words. You brought my pain to life. So now you must help me end it." Suddenly, Renata's back burned with heat. She looked behind her. No one was there. But her skin felt like it was on fire. When she removed her shirt and stood before the bedroom mirror, she saw something horrifying. Faint writing had formed on her back, as if clawed from beneath the skin. "Help me bring back my child." Renata screamed silently. Nothing made logical sense anymore. But one thing was certain, Larasati hadn't gone. And she wanted something deeper than mere revenge. Morning arrived without light. Clouds covered the sky of Bojonegoro like a gray blanket refusing to lift. Renata still trembled as she sat at the dining table, wrapped in a thick blanket, her empty gaze fixed on a cold teacup. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Larasati's face. Or more precisely, that reflection in the puddles, holding the wounds of the past. But that morning, one voice broke the silence, Bu Pardini, standing in the doorway with a worried expression. "You're back, nah, where did that come from?" Renata slowly turned and pulled open the back of her shirt slightly. The faint writing, "Talong Kembalikan Anakku, help me bring back my child," was still visible, though it had begun to fade. In that second paragraph, tension rose. Bu Pardini pressed her lips together, hands trembling. She walked slowly to the old cabinet in the living room, reached behind stacks of cloth, and returned holding a faded wooden-framed photo. Inside it was a young woman wearing a simple white kabaya, smiling softly. Her belly was round. Behind her stood the same well, the old well behind the house. "This is Larasati," Bu Pardini whispered. "Back then, we all thought she was going mad. She talked to herself, laughed alone, cried through the night while hugging her belly. But what we remember most, she gave a name to her baby, even though the child was never born." Renata shivered. "What was the name?" "Aya. Reyhan." Bu Pardini sat down slowly. She said it was a boy. Reyhan loves music. Reyhan loves sunsets. Everything felt alive in her mind. Renata held the photo frame tightly. Suddenly, something stirred inside her. She remembered, last night, before seeing the words on her back, a voice in her head had murmured, "He doesn't know his name." Was that why Larasati remained? Because the child had never been born. Never known. Never acknowledged. Not even the name she had given through tears had survived history. Reyhan must return to his mother, Renata whispered. Bu Pardini stared at her intensely. "What are you planning to do?" "I want to say his name," Renata replied. "Tonight. At the well. I want the world to know that Larasati once loved, and once wanted to live." The sunset descended slowly, painting the teak leaves with hues of aged copper. Renata stood at the back of the house, this time not alone. She carried fresh jasmine flowers, a small candle, and Larasati's diary. Bu Pardini only watched from a distance, afraid, but not stopping her. Renata placed the flowers by the edge of the well, lit the candle, and opened the final page of the diary. She read aloud in a soft voice. "Reyhan, your mother loves you. If we can't be together someday, may the wind carry this song to you. May you never feel alone wherever you are. Suddenly, the wind stopped. The air froze. The candle flickered violently, and ripples formed gently on the surface of the water in the well. Then faintly, the face appeared again. Larasati's face. But this time, she didn't laugh. She only gazed at Renata, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. "I know his name, Larasati," Renata whispered. "Reyhan. Reyhan. Reyhan." When the name was spoken for the third time, the wind howled fiercely. The candle went out. The jasmine flowers swirled into the air, spinning like a tiny whirlwind. And from the depths of the well came a sound, a baby's cry. Faint, but real. Renata wept. The sound slowly faded away, vanishing into the earth. And for the first time since she arrived, the backyard of her grandmother's house felt truly silent, peaceful. The well seemed to return to being just a well. The next morning, Renata woke up in her bed feeling lighter than air. No scent of jasmine. No strange sounds. No mysterious writing on her back. And Bupardini said that last night, she had dreamed of bathing a baby, and handing it over to a woman in a white kabaya who smiled through her tears. 3 days after that night, the atmosphere of her grandmother's house changed. There were no more strange sounds. No more shadows or scent of jasmine. Yet strangely, Renata felt even closer to Larasati. As if the spirit hadn't fully left, not to scare, but to wait for something unfinished. That morning, Renata sat on the porch rereading Larasati's diary. Sunlight filtered through the teak leaves, casting thin shadows across the floorboards. But when she opened the final page, the one previously stained and damaged by water, she saw the writing now appeared clearer, as though it had just been written. "If you're reading this, then I have found you. Someone who listens, not just sees. But please, Reyhan was never buried. Reyhan is still in there." In that second paragraph, Renata's breath caught. Those words pointed to a terrible possibility, that the body of Larasati's baby was still inside the well. She flipped the page and found another faint entry. "That night, I wrapped him in white cloth. I didn't make it to the hospital. He was born, then silent. Then cold. I couldn't bear it." When Bupardini heard the story, her face turned pale. Astigfirullah. When they cleaned the well once before, someone did say there was a bundle of cloth, but they said it was just old rags. Ya Allah. That very day, Renata called the village head and 2 locals. She didn't tell them everything, only that there might be an important object at the bottom of the well. After permission was granted, they began lowering a bucket and flashlight into the deep, dark well, searching its depths. After nearly an hour, one of the men shouted from below, "There's something between the rocks." Soon after, the object was pulled up. It was a bundle of white cloth hardened by time and moisture. Small in size. As the villagers carefully unwrapped it, everyone fell silent. Inside lay neatly arranged tiny bones, those of a baby. No foul odor. No blood. Just quiet remains. The village head closed his eyes. "We must bury this with dignity." That afternoon, at the village cemetery, the people gathered in silence. There was no celebration, only softly recited prayers. A small teakwood tombstone was placed over the new grave, engraved with these words: Reyhan, son of Larasati, 1987. Returned to the earth's embrace with love. As the final handfuls of soil were scattered, a gentle breeze whispered through the bamboo trees. And in a soft voice, only audible to Renata, a whisper said, "Thank you. Now I can sleep." Renata bowed her head. Her eyes were wet. She didn't know whether it was the voice of a spirit or merely the echo of her own conscience. But one thing was certain, that night, there was no laughter. No crying. Only silence, warm, comforting, like a long-awaited embrace. Yet that same night, as Renata began packing to return to Surabaya, she found something beneath her pillow. A rolled-up piece of paper. She slowly unrolled it. Inside was a single sentence, written in delicate handwriting. It wasn't only me. There are many other voices, buried and waiting to be found. Rain fell gently as the Bojonegoro, Surabaya train pulled out of the station. Renata sat by the window, wearing a gray jacket and a thin scarf around her neck. Her backpack rested on her lap, and inside it was Larasati's diary, neatly wrapped like something sacred. She wanted to keep it as a reminder that the world wasn't only made of what could be seen. But as the train slowly passed through wet rice fields and rows of teak trees, Renata's thoughts remained behind, in the backyard of her grandmother's house, under the dim glow of night, in front of the old well where wounded dreams had once been cast away. And in that second paragraph, something strange happened. An elderly woman sitting across from her stared at Renata with a faint smile, then spoke in a hoarse voice. "You can hear them too, right?" Renata turned, heart pounding. "What do you mean, ma'am?" The woman gazed out the window. "I lost my child once too. But he never came back like Larasati? Maybe he couldn't speak that much yet." Renata didn't answer. But the woman's words pierced into her mind. As if this wasn't just a normal conversation. As if it was a sign that what she had experienced was only the beginning of something far greater. When she arrived in Surabaya, Renata returned to her life, campus, assignments, routine. But her nights had changed. Sometimes, when it rained or when the night grew silent, she heard faint whispers in her ears, whether from dreams or elsewhere, she couldn't tell. Not Larasati, not Reyhan, but other voices. Cries, laughter, the sounds of little children calling for their mothers. Some sang Javanese lullabies, others whispered in languages long forgotten. Renata began writing. Not only about Larasati, but about all the voices that reached her. She investigated old wells in small towns, abandoned factory corridors, maternity hospitals shut down since the 1998 riots, even the charred remains of an orphanage in Tuban. She documented everything on her personal blog, Voices That Never Came Home. And strangely, the blog went viral. Many people claimed to have heard the same voices. Many sent emails sharing their own experiences, kuntilanaks in sugarcane fields, crying babies in dorm rooms, weeping women in old station restrooms. These stories seemed to weave together, forming a red thread connecting one voice to another. But one Friday Kliwon night, as Renata slept in front of her laptop, a voice woke her up. Not a dream. Not an illusion. This voice came from inside her own house. From behind the wardrobe. With trembling hands, Renata slowly rose and opened the door of the old wardrobe she barely ever used. Behind the pile of clothes, there was a small gap, a cracked wall gaping open, and from there, the voice came. A soft whisper of a young child, calling gently. "Mommy, I'm still here." Renata closed her eyes. Her hands shook. But this time, she wouldn't run. She wouldn't hide. She would listen. Because she knew, ever since that night in Bojonegoro, she was no longer just an ordinary person. She had become the keeper of forgotten voices. Months later, Larasati's diary rested on a shelf in Renata's small home library. Yet every time she opened the final page, she always found new sentences, handwriting she had never written herself. "My name is Sari. I died in a cigarette factory, burned alive. I am Fitri. They called me crazy, but I only wanted to see my child. My name is Wulan. They buried me beneath a dorm room floor." And Renata could only write, listen, and cry. Because the voices kept coming. And the old well in Bojonegoro was only the beginning. The end.